Okay, we're recording. Hello, everyone. It is I, Elijah Avalon, and welcome back to the channel. This is Mystic Mondays. Nope, Mystic Meetups. Nope, it is Mystic Meetings.
Something about names, I'm telling you.
This is Mystic Meetings, and this is the show where we talk to spiritual people about spiritual things. And today I am so beyond the moon excited to have Owlvine Green here. Owlvine Green. Owlvine. Owlvine, thank you so much for being here.
You are so welcome. I'm so excited to be here as Owlvine or whatever it is.
Can you do a Southern accent, like an American Southern accent?
Can I do one?
Yeah. Like, can you say, hello, or hey, y'all, my name is Owlvine.
Hey, y'all, my name's Owlvine. Not bad, it's not bad, right? Not bad.
That was only for my own amusement. I'm so sorry, everybody. Okay. Okay. But yes, honestly, thank you for being here. I have been a fan of your channel for a very, very, very long time now at this point. And I must say, before we get started, Baba Yaga, like every single time I see anything with her in any form of literature, film, video games, out and about in the world, I always think of you first.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
I really do. I really do. Just because there was like one video you made years ago where you talked about her. And now the both of you are linked in my head like forever.
That brings me so much joy. And it kind of makes sense too, because like I did only make a video, maybe a couple where I mentioned her, but at the time, like I think I found maybe 2 other videos like about her. Like there was just nothing. And now she's exploded. So that's really cool. I think she's just like the coolest bitch. So I love that.
All right. So without ado, let us begin properly. And I start every interview for Mystic Meetings the same way. And that is with the question, Owlvine, why witchcraft? So
I was prepared for this question and I did think about it over the last week or so. So I feel like I've got a pretty good answer. So for me, it is just a beautiful way to interact with and move through the world. I think it's a gorgeous lens to view life through. And what I love, one of the things that I love most about it, well, the sense of wonder, first of all, that just like the world opens and possibility, but also that it is such a vast topic, like there's always something new to learn, and this like I love that. So there's like a million different avenues that I haven't had the chance to go down yet, and I'm so excited to, and I love that I have the rest of my life to like explore and learn and like discover new things, and like that for me is one of the most exciting. But what got me into it at first was that sense of wonder, like that childlike, and it can be so many different things to so many people. I think that's the other awesome thing, the individuality that we can all take from it and bring to it. And that there is space for everyone, not only to be who they are, but to grow, just forevermore. So that's why witchcraft to me.
That is the most succinct but also long-winded answer I've ever heard. And beautifully put. That was amazing. When did witchcraft start for you in your life?
Well, it's kind of twofold. I was introduced to it pretty young, but when I came into it, I was in my mid-20s-ish. I can't remember exactly now, maybe a little bit younger than that. So when I first started, I was actually introduced by a friend of mine when I was 11. And she was telling me all about like how she was a witch and how it was in her family and all these different things, right? About like what witchcraft was, apparently. And so I actually had a few experiences that she sort of led me through while we were at school, where we kind of, I guess, connected with the elements, and like I really felt that magic. Now, the reason I ended up stepping away from it at that point is because she was telling me, and it might click for you before I reveal, but she was telling me that as a witch, something that happens is that warlocks come after you. So I was always like, I'm a very nervous little person, right? Like I've always been like, I had a lot of trauma in my younger life, like, so I was always a scared little bee. So this bothered me, and I particularly one night I remember I was home alone, and I was just like, these warlocks are after me, like I was just so scared. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And my mum had already told me, so I come from a Christian background, and what I find quite interesting is mum, ever since I was young, and this is something I've kind of thought about over the years, but ever since I was young, she warned me against witchcraft, which is interesting because there's none of it in my family. But what I've actually since realized, I think it was the Satanic Panic. So she's Gen Z, right? So she would have been very much kind of in that media. Please.
You mean X, Gen X?
Gen X, not Z. She is not younger than me. Yes, thank you. That would be weird. That would be quite amazing. Yeah, so she's Gen X. So Satanic Panic was a thing for her. So she was always like, oh my God, warning me off. Anyway, so I decided to step away at that point. And then when I was a bit older, so in my 20s, around my mid-20s, like I said, I think I was a little younger, that's when I came to it myself, which is a whole story. But just to tie up that first bit, I only watched The Craft. Sorry, not The Craft. What is it? What's it called? The TV show, you know, I'm talking about. Charmed. I only watched Charmed for the first time about 5 or 6 years ago. I'd never seen it as a kid. I know. Because I was never allowed to watch anything like that. But when I was watching it, I was like, this is what she was talking about. She wasn't a real witch. She didn't have it in her family. It wasn't skipping generations. There's no warlocks like that, you know. I was just like, oh my gosh. So anyway, that's how so I was like, chaos magic. I feel like that was my first kind of, we could call it that maybe. So that was my first introduction. But I came into the craft after I'd left the church. So at around 23, I think I finally decided to stop going to church. And this was a really big deal for me. So I hadn't been really going for several years anyway. I'd kind of been falling away from the church since I was about 18. But I grew up in the church, and I always believed that, like, obviously that was the right thing to do. And if I didn't, like, bad stuff was going to happen, right? So it took me a long time to finally, I think I had not gone to church for a whole year before I said, you know what? I'm not going to go to church anymore. Good for me. And then it was months after that I started to look into, okay, what are my beliefs? Like, where am I going here? I discovered paganism because what I did was I went all the way back as far as I could, because I was like, what is truth? Like, everyone has their version of truth. Every religion believes they are correct. Like, how do I find out what is correct? So I went all the way back, and I was watching on YouTube all these like old, like Paleolithic. Yes. You know, documentaries and stuff, and like it was paganism. So I was like, oh my God. So I was following that along, and eventually I like came across some videos where they were talking about witches, and I was like, this is a real thing. Oh my God. Like, this is actually a real thing. And so I was learning about it, discovering it. But I was very clear that I didn't want to step into anyone else's religion. I was like, because I'm very easily swayed by other people. And particularly back then, I didn't know myself at all. Like, I would hang out with different people, and I would be a different person with everyone because I was just trying to relate to them, you know. So I was like, I don't want that. So my first book I ever read was Wicca by Scott Cunningham. And straight away I said, this isn't for me. Like, this is an organized thing. I don't want to do this, but it is intriguing. So I sort of started playing with some elements, and I learned about it for about 9 months until I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this witchcraft thing. I am going to give it a go. I may go to hell. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to give it a try. And when I did, I actually prayed, and I said to God, look, like, this is where I really feel like my heart is leading me. And I'm doing this in a way, like, I'm doing this for myself for a positive reason. If this is wrong, guide me back to the right path. Like, I really want that. Like, I want to explore this and feel safe to explore this, but I don't want to be doing the wrong thing or whatever, you know, damn my soul. So lead me back. And that hasn't happened. And that's, you know, the beginning of my journey.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Wow, okay. I didn't know any of that, so that's awesome. I was also raised in the church up until, adulthood, and it had a huge impact on me as well. And I definitely carried over a lot of the Christian ideology, theology, and guilt and fear with me into the next path. You know, a question I ask a lot on here is whether or not the Abrahamic faiths have impacted your witchcraft journey. And you really just answered that. But I would also ask, is Christianity still a part of your path actively under that label?
It is now. And only within the last few years, really. So at the beginning, I did the kind of standard pendulum swing of like away from, don't want to touch that, nothing. But I've kind of always been lucky where I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, but I look at people around me and kind of learn from them. So I had a couple of friends who moved away from Christianity at the same time, and they did it to an extreme, you know, as well. Like they were quite, you know, hurt by the church and things like that too. So I saw them moving away from, and I was like, well, now they've gone too far. Like they're going into the hate territory, you know, like all Christians are bad and meh, 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 all this sort of stuff, which is quite rampant, I think, in the witchcraft community in general. These aren't witches. But so I watched them and I was like, okay, like I can see that there's another extreme. They've gone to that extreme. So I kind of naturally found a balance, I feel, fairly early on. And I think because of the way I approached it too, where I just like I did that prayer, like I said that prayer, I spoke to God, and I really trusted that, you know what, you know, it'll all work out. You know, I'll end up where I need to be. So I did step away for many years. And it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I don't remember why, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to just connect in with God energy, right? I'm just going to like just have that moment. I don't remember why, something came up online or what, I don't know. But I was sitting at my desk. I just had this moment where I connected to God in a way that I never had before, like as a Christian previously. It was a bit more like of a feeling like a bit more of a dominant kind of figure, you know, like a father figure, like, and I have big issues with daddy. So I was like always worried about getting in trouble and all this kind of stuff, you know. But this experience, like I closed my eyes and I saw this gold light, like this gold light just filled my entire vision. And I have never felt unconditional love like that before. And I was like, wow, like this is God, you know. And it yeah, like I said, the experience was so different to anything I'd experienced before, but I just kind of left it at that. But since getting into hoodoo particularly, that is a topic that I just like. Oh, it's so delicious. It's the most delicious witchcraft to me. And you know, and a lot of the southern folkloric witchcraft, like I just fucking love it. So once I started getting to that, I was like, okay, maybe I'll have a play. So I do work with some saints, specifically Saint Expedite. So it's kind of more Catholic, I would say. Like I grew up in the Pentecostal church. Okay, so like Catholic, it's not Christian. Okay, yeah. Born again, all of that. Hallelujah. So yeah, so I put elements in. I would say more Catholic in terms of like the witchcraft, but I do actually pray and speak to God now, and like I have that relationship there. So those are kind of the elements of Christianity that I'm exploring at the moment in my craft.
Wow. Wow. So, first off, I have never met a Pentecostal person outside of the South. So
Oh, there
to
you go.
meet one that's even outside of America, that's mind blowing to me. The Pentecostal church is very, very, very big in the American South. Wow, that's crazy. Okay. Anyway, uh, yeah, me too. On a lot of what you said, me too. Like, um, only in the past like 6 months to a year, I would say Christianity has really been kind of creeping around the corner, being like, "Hey, girl," to me too. And there's no way that I would have been in a place to receive that without hate until now. That's wild. Anywho, uh, when it comes to Christianity and Christian influences on your path, do you pull also from like like older, like Judaic practices and mystical traditions like Kabbalah or Kabbalah? How deep do you go down like the Christian mystic rabbit hole, if at all?
That is one of the areas that fascinates me that I haven't had a chance to dive into yet. That was something my husband actually was bringing up to me a long time ago, and I don't remember if I was already I might not have been on a magical path at that point. I can't remember now, but he was talking about it and he was saying, I think this is something you'd be really interested in, you know, that more mystical kind of side of Christianity. But yeah, it's not something I'm familiar with at all. I mean, I know references to the Kabbalah, but I haven't really looked into it much. Only moments with like tarot and different little sort of things that I'm into. But it's definitely something that I would like to get into. How about you?
Yes, and yes. As you know, I'm currently studying for my PhD in comparative religions, and one of the practices I'm focusing on for this whole year of study before I start my dissertation is Kabbalah, and also Gnosticism.
Mm.
And yeah, learning what Judaism was before it was Judaism, it was so beautiful and entrancing to me, these ideas that I'm coming upon and these concepts. And to see how it has, in my opinion, like corroded and devolved into modern Christianity is such a shame, because I am of the mindset that things are always evolving in a positive upward way.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way the world works, in my opinion. But to see this religion just, in my opinion, devolve is really sad, because it started out as something so diverse and all encompassing and female centric and very queer. Like it's awesome. So yeah, I'm incorporating a lot of it into my path right now. And practicing hoodoo and southern folk magic of any capacity, you can't really separate Christianity um, from those practices. But what was I going to say after this? I had like the perfect segue, and now it's left me. Because I was going to take us in a different direction now. So without segue, Wicca. Do you think that Wicca is inseparable from witchcraft as a practice?
I suppose, yes. I mean, a particularly Western tradition, it's had such a massive stamp. Like it is a foundation for our generation, certainly. Whether you have ever read a book about Wicca or anything, like the people that you're learning from and the people that they learnt from have some kind of something to do with that, generally speaking. I don't think it's obviously the be all and end all. Like straight away, I recognized it wasn't for me. But yes, I think that its tendrils are in Western magic, and like at least for the foreseeable future that I can tell, like there's you can't like it's built it to be what it is today. That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Like I'm really liking this interview so far, by the way. Like I'm connecting with everything you say.
It's true. These are great questions.
Yeah. But you're the first person to say that you do think that there is a level of inseparation from them. And I agree with that. I really think they are. They're more than cousins to me. They're more than siblings to me. They are two sides of this one form, because of uh, the modern, what's the word I'm looking for? Because of the modern reinterpretation of witchcraft and reclamation of the word witch,
Mm.
and the invention of Wicca, it is something totally different, and I do think that they're inseparable. Anywho, love that. Uh, are there things in Wicca? Okay, because you talked about my brain is spiraling. I've had a lot of caffeine today, you guys. I apologize, but it's been a very slow day, so I've just been like tea. Anyway, um, uh, Wicca. That's what we're talking about. So, good old Southern boy. Here we go. Cross. All right.
Yeah.
So Wicca. is very structured. And you talked earlier about, finding Scott Cunningham's books. Scott Cunningham, love, come on. But I think that is a generational thing, to the love of Scott Cunningham. You talked earlier about finding that and, realizing immediately, like, this is a little too structured, and I'm trying to move away from something that was very dogmatic and structured into something more open and free. Now, being at the place you are, which seems like a much more like grounded, mature, educated place than you were, X amount of years ago. Are there facets of Wicca's structure, like ritual, god and goddess forms, wheel of the year, things like that? Are there structures and thought forms within Wicca that you do still hold true for yourself in your personal practice?
There are some. I haven't super thought about it, and I'm sure, like, if I went weeding, there would be, quite a few things in there. When I began, I started with a play of god and goddess. I was like, I just kind of see how this goes. But I don't structure my kind of spirituality that way, although I do work with some goddesses and some gods. I don't really follow the wheel of the year, although this is kind of weird because in my job, so I work in the magical industry, and I actually create rituals and spells for every single Sabbat, and have done for the last like 5 or 6 years now. And so with my work, we do lives. So we it's part of, yeah, so for each Sabbat there's a live spell of some kind, but I'm always the one that writes that, although I always write it for the Northern Hemisphere. So it's always the opposite season to where I'm at as well. So I'm aware of the Wheel of the Year. I like the concept, but it's not really something I do a whole lot with. I'm just more like thinking about it, or like if I want to post something, it's great content, happy whatever. Yeah, so other than that, I wouldn't say there's a huge amount, because like my altars have always been exactly however the hell I want to set them up. I've never sort of done them as in a particular way or anything like that. So I would say I'm not super aware, but I do know that there are definitely moments of Wicca throughout my practice. Yeah.
Okay. You brought up something that I was so eager to ask you about, because you're perfectly qualified to answer it, and that is, you live in the southern hemisphere of the planet Earth, and so much of the world that matters and creates society and trends and etc. is in the northern hemisphere, right? So being in the southern hemisphere, do you ever feel left out of the greater witchcraft community online or in general? Or do you have like a healthy witchcraft community there that you engage in? And also, there's a lot of questions. And also, despite just being in the southern hemisphere, so everything is opposite, it is my understanding, if I remember my geography correctly, Australia is like way off from everybody else anyway, regardless of it being in the southern hemisphere. I mean, others like New Zealand and like Indonesia, it's kind of close, but like to me, Australia just seems so by itself in the world. Does that affect you at all, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually?
Okay. What a can of worms. Love this question. So geographically speaking, we are kind of way out on our own. New Zealand, actually, I always think it's closer than it is. And I look at the world map and I'm like, this is Australia, then New Zealand's kind of like off here. So it is actually kind of far away. But South Africa is also about as low, but on the other side of the world. So that tip kind of comes down. Which I actually didn't realize for a long time that it was quite so low as us. So they have very similar weather. And I'm actually at the bottom of Australia as well. So I'm at the bottom of the east coast of the mainland. Now, when I started my practice and was like learning and that kind of thing, I was only coming across Northern Hemisphere practitioners. And in terms of the world population, like the vast majority are in the Northern Hemisphere, which is why, yeah, it's always, a Northern focus. We have so few people down here. So at the beginning, I felt like I honestly was like, am I the only witch in Australia. Like, I was like, I came across no one. I didn't. This is like in my first year, right? Like, I was like, honestly, I think I might be the only one here. Like, there's just no one. So there was definitely, like, as I was, you know, on my own in my room, you know, and hearing about like, oh, it's Samhain now, you know, and this and that. It was like, it was a very lonely kind of experience. Now I don't feel like that. And honestly, I haven't felt like that since I began my own online presence. So I think, so, like, because that enabled me to connect with people. And I think that's ultimately what it was a lack of sense of connection, which I also felt with my land at the time, Australia. I've always felt much more drawn to sort of Europe kind of area, which is where my ancestry hails from, just even in terms of like the landscape and everything. But through my witchery, I've learnt to connect with the land that I'm on, and I feel at home properly now, like I haven't before. But yeah, I think since starting my own channel, reaching out to people, starting to have conversations, I haven't felt alone. And then obviously since then, I know now there are hundreds, thousands, if not, witches in Australia. So I'm not the only one. So that's, I think, a thing as well. And I don't know, it just doesn't bother me like it used to. Like, it did used to bother me if I would see someone talking about whatever Sabbat it was, and I'd be like, well, it's the opposite here. Like, it'd be nice to have a little bit of, you know, just say it, at least acknowledge that we exist. But it doesn't bother me at all now. Like, I'm cool with it. But I do understand that that can definitely be an experience for people. And I think that is something that is kind of cool about my channel, I guess, the fact that, you know, there are more now, but there weren't many Australian witchy content creators when I started. They certainly were there, and I did find them eventually. But that's kind of a nice point of difference, I suppose, as well. Although I love my Americans, and the biggest part of my audience, over half are American, like huge. And I think I only have like maybe like 5 to 8% are Australians.
What?
Like, it's yeah, so it's like, it's literally like 60 something percent are American, I think. Like, it's huge. And then the next is Canada or Canadian, and then European, maybe English, and then Australian, and then it goes down from there, like all people from around the world. But yeah, Americans, yeah, a massive part of my audience, huge.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
spoke about the land and connecting with the land. Particularly lately, I've been very vocal about bioregionalism in my practice and how it plays a part. And I'm wondering, does that for you? Do you use anything that is native to Australia in your practice, on your altar and in spells, creation, etc.? Or are you, and this is not to shame those people, but or are you one of the witches who only uses like the herbs that are talked about in books that aren't grown in your area or even sometimes your country at all?
So for me, so when I started my witchery, I actually lived where I do now, but like down the street. So I was living with my in-laws at the time, who are very Christian, and so I couldn't be open about anything. So I would actually go down to the beach at night and practice there. And that's where I really started for that first kind of year and a half that I was here. You know, it was like with the land there, with the beach there. And now I live back here again because I moved inland for a couple of years, and that's where I started my channel and where all my other videos were filmed. So that was a very different experience. But again, it was more like spiritually connecting with the land. So like drawing energy from it, feeling boosted by it, if you will, as a healing kind of place. I've always been very big into nature. In terms of like crafting spells, generally I do use more you know, English herbs and things like that. I have branched out into some American ones as well, like some, you know, some of the things I come across in the hoodoo books, I'm like, oh, I got to try this, you know. So I do have different things like that. But in terms of my altars, I will bring in stuff from the land to the altars. And I do sometimes use specifically Australian things like gum nuts or, you know, whatever for spells as well. So there is a mix. I would say predominantly my like apothecary is made up of, yeah, herbs and things found elsewhere, but there's both.
So you're like a very global witch.
Very global, yes.
Cool. So why the word witch for you, by the way? Why that moniker?
I have I don't have a set answer for this, but I'll ramble through it with you. I've had my journey with this word several years ago, kind of around the time that I stepped off YouTube. Actually, I was going through a big just spiritual, like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I can't remember the word that I used to use for it, but I was just like, I don't know who I am, what I'm doing. I don't know about this word. I don't know. But I think it's nothing more really than a love of what comes to mind for me when I think of the word witch. So for me, like the ultimate expression, I guess, of witchery are like what I picture is an old woman in a hut in the woods on the side of, you know, a town somewhere, who just like communes with the moon and feet and hands in dirt all day, and people come to her for help and she helps as she can and this kind of thing. That to me is like witch, right? And I just love that so much. So I think that's why. Also, because of being part of community, you know, like meeting a lot of people where I'm like, I really jive with like what these people are doing and thinking and saying and whatever. So like, that's the word that we're using. I think it's a very powerful word, but also it is not something that I enjoy using or speaking to people about unless they are also witch. So I don't, yeah, I kind of like, I don't mind if people that I know ask me questions, but I actually feel like I don't super want to talk about it because I do think it's weird. Like there is a part of me that I'm like, when I project myself into like the world, right, like around normal people, to then someone go, oh, you're a witch, like I'm like, I know it's bizarre, it's crazy, like I don't know, I'm a weirdo, but like, yeah, so there's these two elements for me with it. So I I love the word. I find it powerful, but I also find it really weird, so I don't kind of use it in public
I
that much.
feel, yeah, I feel much the same. Like if someone, because I've never ever in my online presence called myself a witch, except for maybe in passing here and there. And personally, I don't call myself one because it's not a word that I feel connected to. I love the word, and I love the imagery it evokes. Um, but it seems to me, it seems so female and
Mm.
sacred. And you know, I am a gay man, so I understand the feminine to a degree and possess it,
Mhm.
but it doesn't feel right for me to call myself a witch because witch is a word of reclamation and a feminist word inherently, in my opinion. And I think that witchcraft in the modern sense is a feminist movement. And yes, men can be feminists, but it just, do you get what I'm getting at? It feels like not my space to put a stake down in and be like, yeah, I'm a witch too, girls. You know what I mean? Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
Mm.
that's why I've always gone with like mystic or warlock or something different but the same. Yeah, it seems like something that seems just very reserved for women to me, but not. I don't mean that like in a patronizing way. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I find that really interesting. And I'm definitely going to be like adding that into my cauldron of stewing and learning from later. It was interesting you brought up the feminist stuff, and I don't know. I'll just say a thing since we're here, but I I am really not about where the modern feminist movement has moved to now. Um, I identified with kind of the feminist idea years ago. Um, and now I feel that it's moved to an extreme. You know, we were talking about that pendulum swing earlier of moving away from a thing. So I think there's been a heavy move away from masculinity and men. And I think it's come to a place of toxicity. In a large way now. Like I think there are certainly feminists that aren't holding toxic ideas or anything like that, but I think as like a media thing, if you will, an idea that's out there, I think that it's become fairly toxic. I don't like it. I'm more of like, and I think most people are more of like that equalist sort of view. You know, I don't think men are bad. I don't think that a lot of my problems are their fault. You know, I don't know. There's just a lot of things. But anyway, so that's just my little 2 cents about that one.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, it's always been a precarious space for me to be in, because I don't want to sound like I'm like, oh, poor pitiful men, we're so like downtrodden, because we're not. And I'm white, so but yeah, I've always felt like an outsider in the modern witchcraft space. So I kind of just went off into my own corner. And there are so many queer witches and so many male witches, and almost all of the male witches I've encountered are gay or queer in some way. And you talked about feminism swinging to the other side and becoming like so female centered that it is like anti-masculine. I, for years and years and years, and still to a large degree, have felt that Wicca is the same way. They talk about there being a god and a goddess, but everything is so goddess oriented, and the god is completely ignored, and which is fine if that's your jam. And I get it from a sociological place, because again, it's a predominantly female space, I think. And so you have women who are getting to finally celebrate themselves in a patriarchal world. It's this escape, it's this place to finally explore and celebrate being woman. And I get that, and I get the aversion to masculine energy for some of those practitioners. And another thing that made me feel isolated in that space, not just my physical gender, is because I've always just inherently worked with male spirits mostly.
Me too, actually.
Yeah, and continue to. I have two very, very, very amazing female spirits that I work with since day one. But yeah, it's a lot of males. And I mean, that speaks to my own journey and psychological journey, because I do think that the spirits we work with inform our mental growth and our spiritual growth and facilitate that. But anywho, I digress. We could go down a rabbit hole in that for quite a while.
We could.
But my question to you is, why do you think so many witches are female? Do you think there are more female witches than male witches? And why are so many witches queer?
Okay, so I do think I think with magical space, I think the occult generally is more masculine. And then witchcraft generally is more feminine. And I think that's because within the occult, so I'm kind of thinking more like ceremonial magic type stuff. It is very structured. It's quite linear. It's like we move to this stage, to this stage, to this stage. You build up in this way, which is a masculine thing, right? Like it's more a straight road kind of, like this is where we're going. And witchcraft is more chaotic, which is a more feminine kind of quality, creative, if you will. So it's like it can kind of be whatever the hell you want it to be. Like there's not really an A and a Z point, it's just kind of like whatever. So I think that attracts feminine type people, because generally the feminine is more about that kind of like just to generalize, but like we're feeling out our emotions, we're intuitive, we're doing this kind of thing, like, and feminized people as well, of course. And then again, the occult again is more sort of structured, I guess. So I do, as far as I can tell, there are more women in the witchcraft space. There are certainly a lot of queer people coming in now too. I think it's a similar type thing. I think a lot of people who are queer, there is a stronger feminine element there, although I know obviously it's different for females. But this is kind of like, as someone who is not part of the community, this is just my thoughts, right, for now. But I also think there is an element of fad happening here. So witchcraft is currently very popular, as you know, and being queer of any type is also very popular right now. So there are a lot of people who are either or, who won't be in 5 years' time. Like, this is like a big moment for both communities, if you will, and they just cross over so well because of the chaos, the rainbow, the whatever, you know, just like you do your thing and bleh, it's all good. Like, we're happy here for you to do your thing. So I think that's why it's just like it's a moment here now, which I think will die down in a few years. But again, I think that chaos and that freedom is what attracts both women and queer people.
Oh, wow, I'm so happy that I love every answer you've given in this interview. I really do. But I love that you brought up really quickly in a sentence there that, you know, it is very popular right now, and it's a fad with the mainstream society, and not just witchcraft, but being queer, because it's so true. And I've gotten in so much like trouble for saying that. And I love that you said, you know, people experiment with being queer, and they might not be queer in 5 years.
Yeah.
I love that you said that. That's all. I just had to say that. Of course. But shifting again with no beautiful segue. This, like, in addition to queerness being very popular right now in witchcraft and the greater magical community, I also think that not just the Abrahamic stuffs, but specifically demons, demonology, Satanism, and I have to specify here, and I've realized this from past interviews, I don't mean Satanism as in, like, you know, the socio-political group, you know, what is it, the Church of Satan or the Temple of Satan? I get them confused. Anywho, I'm not talking about the socio-political group. I'm talking about like Luciferianism, like, you know, Satanism. I have seen Satanism and demonology really, really become popular in the witchcraft community. Is that something that you have seen and noticed? And is it something that you have, you know, put your feet in?
It's definitely something I've noticed, yes. I think if you've been around for a minute, it's something that's difficult not to notice because of where it came from. Where it came from in the beginning was still those kind of the 50s ideas of like, witchcraft isn't evil, oh my god, like we have to make sure everyone knows that we don't fuck with demons, we don't do nothing, like it's all good here. Whereas now there is a more broader acceptance, I guess, of these kinds of paths. And I think, again, it's just, I mean, in my opinion, it's that pendulum swing that we're seeing again. So it's like, this is the way we grew up, this is the way that things were done, we were told anything outside of that was bad, and then all of a sudden you become an adult and you're like, oh, I can discover and do whatever I want here. So I think there is more of that exploration towards that side of things as an answer, I suppose, maybe to feeling oppressed as a younger person within those spaces. And, you know, because that kind of side of magic is very much about like, you know, enjoyment and pleasure and like, what do you want and that kind of thing. Whereas I think Christianity can be a little bit more others focused, you know, or at least you join in the group for the sake of others. Whereas the other side is much more like, what do you want to do? Like, and let's have fun with that. So yes, agree. There's definitely a huge uptick. And I just think that it's that kind of, as a society, we are shirking off tradition in many ways. I think it will have some pretty bad consequences. But I think there is already really good stuff about it as well. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up.
Love that. I'm very happy because I'm really loving every answer you give, and I like wholeheartly agree with every single thing you've said. And that, like, you must know how rare that is to meet in another person like that, you know, like in general. Like,
Definitely.
Yeah,
it is.
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. It's just like mind blowing.
I love it.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh. So do you personally use any satanic or demonic stuffs in your practice at this time?
That's right. That was your other question too. I don't a lot, but I certainly have. So there's like, I don't really know how to describe it. It's not in a ceremonial way at this point. So like with the specific, you know, but I have connected with my idea of the horned god as like the witch's devil as well. So this is in a much more kind of free-flowing, I guess, witchy kind of way. And one example I can give is when I went away on a solo camping trip. Gosh, it was ages ago now. It must have been like 7-8 years ago or something. I went to this particular spot and it was just glorious. And there was like this little woods there and it was just so magical. And I had decided that I would connect with him during this kind of retreat that I was at, spiritual retreat. And I had such visceral experiences with him in several different guises over that weekend, like where I can still see him walking with me in that woods, you know. And then at night I called up like this demonic kind of dog kind of demon kind of thing to actually protect me and surround my perimeter. And that is a figure that I have continued working with. So it's like, it's almost like him as like more how you would think of like horned god, Lord of the Forest type deal, which could very much go into that kind of demonic-y kind of land spirit thing, depending on who you're speaking to. Obviously, if you're talking to a Christian, everything outside of God is demonic, so that makes it easy. But yeah, so I fucked around with different guises of his, and that's kind of mostly how I work with him at this point. I've also worked with the inverted pentagram a bit in spells and as seals and different things like that. But in terms of like going in deeply with demonology, that's another area that's on my list for one day. There are so many books that I just like I'm drooling over that I've seen around that I'm like, oh my God, like I cannot wait for one day to just get in there. It's gonna be great.
Do you believe in evil as a concept?
I have changed on this one over the years. And I do now, yeah. Like, I think ultimately people are always serving themselves, and generally speaking, only consciously. They're not doing it for bad reasons. But I think we do things to harm ourselves all the time subconsciously, right? But I do think that I don't know, I'm a very empathic person. Which I don't necessarily think is a good thing. And I do think it's a trauma response in many ways, for me at least. But just the non-consideration of other people with some of the acts that people choose to take, like I just don't think it could be described as anything other than evil. I mean, the easy one is Hitler, right? Like, I mean, but so many other examples. Like, it's just like these people who have so much power and so much ability to do good. Many of them start out kind of saying that they are, but very quickly you can see they turn away from that and they don't actually care who they stomp on to get what they want. So I think that self-serving, while not ultimately a bad thing, and I think it's something that we do a lot in witchcraft, can certainly be evil. Yeah.
You talked about the witch's devil. Do you believe in the Christian Lucifer / Satan / devil?
Yeah, I still have that in my head. I haven't sort of thought about it specifically kind of for a long time, but there's certainly that element there, and it's part of my kind of, I guess, internal mesh of philosophy that I've got going on. But I don't know. I actually haven't really thought about it for a long time. I feel like the last kind of moment where I really gave it a lot of thought when I was thinking about him specifically as the adversary and wondering, like, is that such a bad thing, you know, and kind of playing with that kind of idea. So for me, in terms of spirits, because I think that's kind of attached to a larger question, I have a lot of different ideas about what spirits are and aren't. And I put on different hats for different things, you know, like at this time, I believe this thing about spirits. At this time, I believe something different about spirits. And I kind of hold all those in my head. So I feel like with Satan, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, here's a being, he's not a being, he's a thought form, he's an idea, real, not real. I don't know. It's like the gamut, you know?
Yeah. I love what you said about, like, your beliefs on things can come and go and be mutable. I think so many people need to hear that, because people think that their beliefs must be rigid and firm and not changing for them to be true. And I think
Yeah.
many things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, I think for me that was my big moment. Like a few years ago, when I was saying, when I left YouTube and I was having this inner crisis, spiritual crisis of like, what the hell do I think? I think what that was, now that you've just said it, I kind of have clicked, was me at that time. Like I really was trying to find, like, what do I believe? Like, what are my boxes that I want here? Um, and like, because with witchcraft it just kind of all blew off, you know. So I was like, oh my god, like I was just feeling like I was stuck in the middle of a desert, not knowing like what I'm supposed to be doing here, you know. That was kind of the feeling. And I think a lot of people feel that when they come into witchery as well, just like the world opens up and you're like, oh, now what do I do, you know? But I think I obviously have come to that point now where I am more comfortable being free flowing with it. Although I will say, something that I often think about is that going to make facing death much harder for me? It's not something that I've really heard anyone talk about, but I think that it's like, if I am dying, say over a period of time or whatever, but like if I'm facing my maker, it's like, will my chaotic kind of free moving beliefs help me in that moment, or am I going to have more fear because I don't have the certainty of I'm going to heaven, or I'm going to the summer lands, or I'm being reincarnated, or like whatever the belief is, you know? Like I think that having some kind of specific afterlife belief can be a really good thing, just in terms of that certainty. I think a lot is brought when you open it up, but I'm going to be interested to see how that affects me and perhaps others around me, because obviously I know a lot of witches, and a lot of them around my age, and you know, we'll age up together, to kind of see what that's like as we kind of begin to face these kind of things. So that was long-winded, but yeah.
uh Back to the devil. Do you think, you talked about evil, and yes, you do believe in your definition of evil, and you do accept, the presence of demons and people's interactions with them and the devil. So do you think that demons and the devil are evil?
Oh, good question. Not inherently. I think that there is that vibe of like self-serving. Maybe not that they are self-serving necessarily, but that's the vibe, right? So it's like, what's good for me in this moment, that's what's good. There isn't a consideration of external. So I don't think inherently they're evil. In my experience, I haven't had that experience, but I think they're ones that are, as far as I understand. So this is coming more from like an intellectual point, I suppose. And I've certainly seen that belief, but it's not something I've dived enough into to kind of have a specific opinion or a set opinion or whatever on it. So I think it really could go either way. And I think it depends on your worldview. I think it depends on how you approach, very much as well, like any spirit. I think if you approach with, I don't know, I guess, I mean, evil, I mean, it's a very strong word, but if you approach with like darkness in your heart, if you will, like I think that's what you will have reflected, and that will be your experience as well, you know. I mean, and this, again, to go off topic a bit as I do, but I feel like we see this a lot in like the anti-witchcraft testimonials, you know, like I was a witch, I was into tarot, I was this, and it was so bad, it was so evil. But you listen to their why. How did they approach the witchcraft? That's why their experience was the way it was. They weren't going in to better themselves and to explore the world and to be open and to have fun. They were going in to dominate someone, or they were going in to discover all the secrets of the world. I don't know, just whatever, just things that's why their experience became what it was. So are demons inherently evil? Maybe, maybe not. In my experience, no, but I haven't approached them that way. So I don't know.
I love that. I love that. It makes me think of there is a Hindu mystic who's actually American named Ram Dass. And
Yes.
yeah, I love Ram Dass.
Yeah.
And he has a quote that is, everything I know is subject to change.
Mm.
And I love that. And that seems to be an overarching like theme here in what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
something you embrace, it seems, is that you don't rigidly hold on to everything that comes to you as a truth at that time.
Yeah. Can I tell you something actually just on this, and just to go a bit off topic, but so I thought I was a Cancer rising. Okay, up until about 5 minutes ago. So I finally set off my a time of, like, when was I born? I just, you have to go through this whole process where it's Freedom of Information Act here in Australia, where you can access, medical information. And it was all these loops I had to jump through because I'm like, I need to know what my time of birth was, because my mum said it's somewhere between here and here. And when I was learning about astrology a long time ago, I was like, it's got to be Cancer rising. And my friend who was super into astrology is like, you're a Cancer rising. But time of birth, got back last week, I'm actually a Gemini rising. And this has just exploded my brain and changed. And I'm like, it makes so much sense, because I always wanted to be Gemini rising, but I was like, I don't feel like I don't have those qualities. And now I'm realizing I do have those, that whole, like, the mutable, like the whatever. And for me, again, just to kind of wrap it up, but the thing with the Cancer rising is predominantly like the house is filled with Cancer, and I've got some big kind of planets in there, which is where I was like, yes, there's the Cancer rising, but also there's this little slither of Gemini rising, which is actually what's on the cusp and like coloring all of this. So I'm embracing my, like, maybe a little this, maybe a little that, it makes so much more sense now why I'm like this.
I love that. I love that. I'm a sun sign Cancer.
Yes,
So
you
yeah.
are. I love Cancer. Like, that energy is just so beautiful.
I love that you say that, because I feel like we are the black sheep of the zodiac. But that's a whole nother conversation. And I have evidence. I have evidence as to why I think that and why it is fact. But
Oh,
anywho,
interesting. I want to see that video. Just saying, put that out there, please. I want to see.
Yeah, like, I will change your mind if you think that we're not. Anywho, if we accept that God with a capital G is good and holy, and that the devil is his opposite, then we're taught to believe that the devil is evil. But as you said, you're not completely sold on that. If demons and the devil inherently want to self-serve themselves and take just to help themselves, why would anybody want to work with them if that is true? What's to gain from it then?
Well, I think like, it's the vibe of self-serving, rather than them necessarily being self-serving. And I think that's what a lot of the grimoires and stuff are about. It's like, hey, this is how you grab this demon, this is how you get them in a little circle and trap them, and then get them to, how you can work with them to get what it is that you want. So I think what it is that there is it no holds barred? Is that the saying with them? So it's like, if you're approaching God, even if you're doing it from a witchcraft space, what most people do is they say God is only good. So I can only ask him for things that don't only serve myself. This is still a really big thing in the witchcraft space, by the way. It's like, you're not allowed to do magic that's self-serving, which I just think is a bizarre concept.
I think that comes from Wicca, honestly.
Yeah,
I think
which is, again, that roots in Christianity, that same idea of like, we're not stepping too far away, we're doing things a little different, but we're not too different here. God's still, the good one. So I think there's that. So it's like, it's even though God is like the all or whatever, it's like we feel constricted by what we've been taught. This is all you can sort of ask for here. Whereas the demons, it's like, I mean, it's a fucking party. You can do whatever you want over here. They don't care. So then it's like so much more open and free. So I do think, again, intellectually speaking, there is that element of them serving themselves, which is why in the grimoires there's often like, here's the formula. Make sure you do this and this and this, so they don't like get you know, behind you and do something else. But yeah, I don't know. I just kind of fell off the end there. But yes, that's what I think.
I love it. I love it. Oh, I had a great question and I keep remembering it when you're talking. And then when the camera turns back to me with the box, I'm like,
I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna write everything down. Otherwise it's gone.
I wrote it down. I wrote everything down. But except that question. Anywho, well, maybe it'll come back again. Uh let's see. We were talking about the devil. Oh, I want to remember it so bad and I can't. Okay.
So annoying. Come back question. Come back.
Angels then, going to the other side, do you work with angels at all? Because I do in a lot and in a very big way.
Okay. Well, I would love to hear about that. I have a little, but not a lot. There was a few years ago where I was really getting into the idea, and so I was working with 4 different archangels, and I liked that, but I was never big into them when I was a Christian either. Like, they were a concept that was around and stuff, but I never really connected with the idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so now it's not a huge thing for me. Although I do feel like I call in Archangel Michael from time to time, like, you know, Archangel Michael before me, Archangel Michael behind me, above me, below me, you know, this kind of thing. So yeah, not a whole lot, but please, what do you do with your angels?
Oh, that would be I'm long-winded as well. That's a typical American Southern thing. We would be here a long time if I went on about angels because I'm very passionate about them.
Well, that's another video you need to make too, please. We've got 2 now.
No, I remembered while you were talking what that question was, and when I was like, "Oh," to you, it was because I was looking for my ink pen, couldn't find it, so I wrote it in ashes from my candle.
It's so witchy. Oh my god.
No. And it's not even like a super important question or anything. It just was something I was curious about because we have been talking for quite a while about Christianity, really more so than witchcraft, but also how it relates to our witch practice. And one of the things was, you were talking about being raised Pentecostal, which is a form of Protestant Christianity, correct? Correct?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
And, I was raised in the Church of Christ, which is also Protestant, and it is, from my understanding so far in my studies, that all Protestants practice ritual baptism. Is that correct for the Protestants?
Yeah, well, at least in my churches that I went to, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So were you baptized when you were a member?
Yes.
I was too. So does that, if at all, give you any sense of like peace and like, does it let you absolve yourself? Because earlier you were talking about coming to the end of life and like not knowing really what is after, and if things that you've been believing or practicing are right or wrong, and if the church's afterlife is right or wrong, and like what's going to happen to you. And you said being in this chaotic space, and maybe I've got all my bases covered and I'll be good no matter what happens, but maybe that'll also count against me. So do you think that you having been baptized helps you in any way and gives you any peace of mind about the afterlife?
I've actually never thought about that before. For me, being baptized was a very spiritual experience. I did it when I was 16, I think, was when I did it. And it was my own choice, which is, I guess, different for a lot of people. It was a very, very powerful spiritual experience. But I didn't feel like I had to do it either. Like, I know there are those beliefs that, like, if you're not baptized, you won't go to heaven. In some, I believe, sects, at least, of Christianity. I never thought about it like that. And for me, it's always been about what's in your heart. Like, that's kind of how I've always understood it. So it's like, there's that Bible verse that, like, something along the lines of, essentially you won't get into heaven by works alone. It's really about that kind of heart space. So I would say no, and because it's always been more about personal relationship. And now that I'm thinking about that, because again, like I said, with a lot of the stuff I haven't really come to conclusions, but I'm thinking that the connection that I have with God outside of Christianity will probably be what I lean on in those times. You know what I mean? If, you know, in the life death situation.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are really close to being at the end. So I've got to start winding it down. But there's so many more questions I want to ask you about. One of them being, what do you personally think is one of the most taboo parts of your practice? And I don't mean taboo in terms of the wider community outside of witchcraft, because then it's all taboo.
True.
But within witchcraft, what is an aspect of your practice that you think is taboo in our community?
Ooh. If I thought about it, I'd probably have a better answer. But what's coming to my head straight away, what I avoided talking about for a long time was my interest in hoodoo. You know, because there is a big crackdown at the moment of like, you know, you've got to stay in your own corners and you can't intermingle and whatever, which I really feel like that's the vibe that's happening at the moment. I know it's being framed differently, but I think that's what we've got to. You're not allowed here. You're not allowed here. You stay in your own space. Don't culturally mix.
It's that pendulum again, you know?
Exactly. So so because of that kind of level of toxicity that we had, which I do feel like we're coming out of now, I do feel like it's much more open and starting to chill a little bit, which is so nice. The last few years have been insane. But that's probably been, I guess, the thing that I'm like, I'm not going to talk about that. And I was worried about talking about it and getting people come at me and get mad and whatever. I'm just having a quick look. I'm trying to like, are there any books that are going to give me? I think that's probably it. That and Brazilian magic. I've been quite interested in learning. I don't know a lot about it, but that's been an area of interest as well. I would say those are the most taboo. Yeah.
Okay, I was looking at my notes because you touched on something I wanted to talk about. And that was, you know, I practice Southern folk magic. That's the basis of my craft, and it is inherently very African in some spaces. A lot of it comes from slaves. So a lot of people, you know, would have the opinion that I'm not allowed to practice it. But that's a whole nother conversation. And I understand your hesitance to even speak on it, especially in our current climate in the world. And, you know, cultural appropriation was a word that you brought up, and it is a word that's brought up a lot in the world right now. And I think everyone watching this, I really, really, really encourage you to actually Google, not Wikipedia, go to like somewhere for reals, although I do love Wikipedia. Go to like Britannica Online, Oxford Dictionary, and look up the definition of cultural appropriation, cultural appreciation, cultural misappropriation, cultural, or what is it, acculturation, and assimilation. I know that's a lot. Rewind and listen to all this. Those are all completely different concepts. And they are all at this time in the world, I've noticed, being all folded under just cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
And there are huge differences between all of those things. So I would encourage everyone to go look those up. And I think it will blow your mind and hopefully open your, not just your mind, but also your heart. Because I think there is a level of like, not just gatekeeping, but like, how do I put this? Like, heart energy going on in the world where everyone's just like blasting out like painful heart chakra energy all over the earth, and they don't know what to do with it, and they're just using it as like their vehicle to voice their opinions on everything. Does that make sense? I got like really weird here.
Yes, 100%. I get that. Like, and I feel like that's such like a Cancerian like understanding of what's going on too. And like I'm so 100%, I 1000% agree. Like some of the stuff that people are going like, you can't do this, you can't do that. I'm like, what are you even saying? Like, what are you like? You're not allowed to use sage anymore. Like, stop it. Like, what? No. Like there are certain practices, yes, and if you understood the difference between them, you can see where the nuance is. You know, I can't even remember what it's called now. Smudging is a cultural practice. Sage is a plant that grows on the earth. Like, it's, yeah, there's a lot of weird ideas, and a lot of people 100%, and this is what we've been encouraged to do over the years as well, is like anything that you're hurt by or slightly offended by, or who you think someone else might be slightly offended by, cut loose, let it out, tell everyone, you know. It's like, oh.
What I think is strange about it too is like the largest group of people that I've seen and witnessed online and in person that seem to be the most vocal about helping people understand cultural appropriation and stopping it are white people.
Yeah.
So it's like you're like, what are we doing? You're telling everyone to stay in their lane, practice only, and believe in only, and participate only in what you have genetically and racially. That kind of sounds a little especially coming from a group of white people. Sounds a little iffy and weird.
It's insane. The level of like the lack of self-awareness is stunning. Like, it really is. And look, I mean, I know a lot of it is coming from the younger generation, and this is how it always is, right? Like, we did the same thing when we were little. We yelled and screamed and thought we knew everything about the world. It's just what we do as humans. It's just the kind of the rite of passage. What's crazy is how many people who are older, who have a bit more life experience, are just like whoop, going on that train as well. But it's just been a perfect storm, really. The fact that we're all locked in our houses for however long, we all thought, at least at the beginning, we were going to die, you know, and then like the internet exploded, and it was just the perfect storm. And like, we're just trying to figure out how to navigate this at the moment, and the kids have got the wheel, and is that a great idea? We'll see. But I don't know, it's interesting right now, but it's definitely people, like, there's the hurt and the pain and the anger are what are rewarded at the moment.
Yeah.
Again, I do think there's some balance coming back in now, which is really good.
Yeah, I think that the youth generation now is louder only because of the internet. Like,
Yeah.
because the internet exists now, Generation Z and Generation Alpha behind them, more people are paying attention to what the youth have to say and their opinions. And because so many people are living majority of their lives through the internet, that informs our beliefs. And because people are sheeple, that informs our beliefs. And yeah, so since the youth are louder because their voice is more widespread and easily accessed, I think that's why it seems like at this time everything is so radical, where it's like a lot of these opinions, views have always been around. They're just more easily seen and expressed now because of the internet. Winding down. Spells are super fun.
Yes.
And taking it back to a lighthearted place. Are there any like necessities for you when it comes to, you know, I'm Owlvine and I'm sitting down at my altar and I'm getting really country. Did you hear that? Anyway.
And I have such a beautiful accent.
It comes and goes with me.
Accent, by the way, I love it.
It comes and goes with me. Sometimes I sound a little more enunciated and sometimes I don't. And it just comes and goes in waves. And I blame that on doing theater as a child because we were told to enunciate so much. Anywho, so my accent is a little whack. Anywho, when you're Owlvine and you're sitting down at your altar, you're getting ready to cast a spell, and you know you're thinking, I'm casting a spell for love. Are there things that you immediately are like, well, I have to do this, this, and this, or is it always completely free flowing?
Fabulous question. I'm going to say it's a little bit of a mix. So my area of predominant study has been spellcraft for like the last 6 years, I would say, since I was hired for the job that I work at now. I was like, shit, I need to learn a lot, you know. So I was really focused on that kind of spellcraft aspect. So I feel like now there's a lot up here that I can easily access. And I believe this is what people talk about when they're speaking about intuition. I think intuition is best used on a solid base of knowledge and understanding. And then you use intuition on top of that to, you know, grab those little bits and create your own kind of thing. Not to say that you can't use your intuition right off the bat and have fun and do the things, that's fine. But I think that the best way to kind of go about things personally is to have that knowledge base, then use intuition. So when I'm casting spells, what I will often do, not always, but what I like to do is kind of look at like 5 or 6 different examples of what people are doing, and I go, ooh, okay, so there's all these ideas, and then I'll create my own little thing with elements perhaps of some, and then my own thing as well. I tend to do that more in workspace, and it's something that I do really love doing, actually. It's just that sort of little moment of research. But I feel like I got a lot up here now. So yeah, predominantly I would say it is intuitive. However, there are certainly foundations, things that I typically do, or ingredients I typically use, or times, you know, different things like that. So it is a little of both.
Okay, great answer. There are like 5 more questions I have that I want to ask you, but we have gone over on time so much that it's sad. I'm going to practice restraint and ask you one last question, because we do have to end, and I'm so sad.
Me too. This has been fabulous.
Yeah. Last question. I always start the interview the same, and I end the interview the same. And that is, now is your time, Owlvine, to speak to the little childrens watching this video. And I do mean childrens, like people under 20, who find this video and are very new and green and are wondering, you know, where do I start? Like, this is so overwhelming. There's so many aspects to magic and to witchcraft. Where do I start? How do I even begin? And like, are there requirements? Like, what do I do? And there's that southern accent again. Okay, what do I do? And what do you say to those kids? You know, like, where do they start? And what is important beginning out? And what's not important?
Well, first of all, I hope I haven't offended you with anything I've said today. I do love your generation. I do, like, I know that sometimes when you get a little older, I reckon once you get into 30s, there can be this like, ugh, children thing, and you know, which is so offensive when you're younger, by the way. You're like, excuse me. So I don't mean offense. But I do have this question asked to me quite a bit, and it is something I've given a lot of thought to, because first of all, everyone experiences that sense of being totally ungrounded and like, not like, you know, like I said before, the world kind of, the roof blowing off the world, and then anything is possible. And for me, it took me 2 years before that feeling started to go away, where I kind of felt like, okay, I think I've got some of the basics down now. I feel like I have a bit of a foundation. So be open to the chaos that is coming into magic. Use it as a space to explore, like, because you aren't anchored yet, it's so much easier to like explore new things, you know, and try different stuff. So try everything, anything that catches your eye or interest, have a look at it. Keep a list, if you like, as well, of topics. As I've said, I mean, I've been doing this, I think it's almost 10 years now. And there are so many topics I haven't even touched yet, you know, like so many. So it's an ongoing thing. So be open to that. Read, look at whatever interests you. I would say check things with yourself first as well. I know generally we very much listen to external first. And that can be a good thing to learn from people who have gone before you. But it's more important to listen to your inner guidance. I think particularly on a path like this that is or can be so tailored, always sit with your own intuition first, develop that sense of intuition. That's a bit of a journey. But anytime you get an intuitive hit come in, the way to grow that ability is to acknowledge when you go, okay, I'm getting a feeling about something, to follow it through, and to acknowledge it once it's done. Yes, it came through to me. Thank you, spirit, or whatever. Give me more. That's how you'll develop your intuition, which is basically the bedrock of witchcraft, I think. I hope that makes some sense. Yeah, so be open. embrace the insanity that it is at the start, that it feels like, you will find your path. You will find your path. And yeah, do your best. Be very careful with who you allow to speak into your life. I think that's another big thing. Don't give people authority over you unless they've earned it, or at the very least, understand that you are trying out someone's leadership for a time. And if it doesn't work, walk away.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Lastly, where can people find you? Plug yourself.
Plugging in. I am on YouTube, kind of. Haven't made a video in a while, but plan to. So I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram. I'm not really on Facebook anymore, though I do have a page there. But I'm owlvine.green on Instagram and just Owlvine Green on YouTube.
Awesome. And those links are going to be down below where you can follow her. And you should. And definitely check out her YouTube videos. She has some really, really, really good ones. Actually, right before we started filming, I was watching a couple of years old video of yours talking about if you can even be a witch and a Christian at the same time. Yeah.
A popular video, that one.
Yeah. Yeah, go check her stuff out because she's knowledgeable and kind and delivers things in a kind way, which I like because some people deliver things a little slanted, and I don't like that. So check down below, follow her links, check out my links, and Owlvine, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an amazing conversation, and we might have to do round 2 and get all those other questions answered.
We definitely do. Like, seriously, I really enjoy talking to you. I love your delivery of things and your ideas. Like, I find you a fascinating person, and that's why I asked you to be here, and you did not disappoint.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening, morning, day, or moment, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.